This week on Viewpoints.
Robinson thought it would be a great idea to carve sculptures in the Black Hills of historical Western figures.
What you didn't know about the iconic Mount Rushmore. Then,
I can wear the same holy clothes and look a mess because I haven't had my hair cut and I don't know how long. I don't care. But my kids need haircuts. My kids need uniforms. My kids need boots.
Have we reached a wide-scale affordability crisis? I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints. Does the name Gutzon Borglum mean anything to you? Okay, how about the name Mount Rushmore? Of course, everyone knows that one, so who's this Borglum character? He's the artist behind the design and construction of the iconic landmark. This year marks 100 years since the U.S. government approved construction on the massive project in South Dakota. But you might be surprised to learn that the original design for Mount Rushmore wasn't a presidential portrait. To fully understand the initial idea, it's important to go back and grasp what the West looked like in the 1920s.
Doane Robinson was the state historian of South Dakota for a number of years, and he was the state historian in the 1920s when South Dakota's economy was tanking. And it was tanking in large measure because post-World War I, commodities prices and agricultural prices slumped big time in South Dakota and the rest of the Midwest. And what that meant is that in the state of South Dakota, they were experiencing the Great Depression about a decade before the rest of the country. Banks were closing, farms were foreclosing, unemployment was skyrocketing. While the rest of the United States was partying, South Dakota was suffering. And Doane Robinson really wanted to be able to diversify the state's economy away from agriculture, away from commodities. So he had an idea to really ramp up the tourism industry in South Dakota.
That's Matthew Davis, author of A Biography of a Mountain, The Making and Meaning of Mount Rushmore.
So Robinson thought it would be a great idea to carve sculptures in the Black Hills of historical Western figures, people like the great Lakota leader Red Cloud, or Lewis and Clark, or George Armstrong Custer, or Sacagawea, the guide who led Lewis and Clark west. He wanted to carve them into the Black Hills to attract these car tourists that were beginning to drive from the Black Hills of South Dakota to Yellowstone National Park.
And you might be wondering where the name Mount Rushmore came from. Before carving ever began, the peak had many names, including the Six Grandfathers, as it was known to the Native American tribe, the Lakota. Later, settlers used a range of informal names like Cougar Mountain and Keystone Cliffs. Its permanent name arrived in 1885, when a New York lawyer named Charles Rushmore asked a local guide what the mountain was called. The guide allegedly replied that it had never had a real name until now, and they called it Rushmore. The name stuck, and in 1930, the United States Board on Geographic Names officially recognized it as Mount Rushmore. As for Robinson, his idea to transform the mountain into a tribute to the western frontier was an initial success. However, that idea quickly changed once the famed sculptor Gutzon Borglum joined the project.
Robinson really was ecstatic that he had been able to hire a man like Borglum to do the work. And so he let him do whatever it was he wanted to do and gave very little pushback to the changing of the ideas. Robinson wanted it to be economic, and it has succeeded in being economic. Borglum was interested in the economics behind it, but he was more interested in the politics behind it. He wanted to create Mount Rushmore into an homage to the political system of the United States. He thought that the American democratic system of government was the apotheosis of Western civilization, and he wanted to create something that reflected its greatness. And his initial idea was to carve 4 presidents into the mountain that reflected American empire and American exceptionalism. So you had, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt, who he chose for different aspects of that empire. And they were the ones that he initially thought of. They were the ones that he carved, and they're the ones that are there today.
Before he was hired to work on Mount Rushmore, Borglum was the original sculptor and designer of Stone Mountain, a massive Confederate memorial carved into a granite mountain just outside of Atlanta. At the time of its inception in 1915, the project was financially backed by the Ku Klux Klan.
Borglum's relationship with the memorial was in many ways a relationship with the Klan. The Stone Mountain Memorial Association was full of Klan members. Borglum corresponded with Klan leaders across the country. He introduced Klan leaders to the president, to senators, to other politicians. He was very influential in terms of shaping Klan policy. And he did have many of the beliefs that the Klan did have. I mean, he shared their anti-immigrant views or anti-Semitic views. He was a racist. And I think all of that was something that was part of Borglum's personality and politics while he was carving Stone Mountain.
Interestingly, none of these more controversial details are publicized on any of the signage or educational materials at Mount Rushmore.
Borglum's affiliation with Stone Mountain, Borglum's affiliation with the Ku Klux Klan is something that is still hidden at Mount Rushmore. I mean, the memorial at Mount Rushmore just recently created and produced and is now showing new interpretive films that were, when I first started this project, they were very outdated, over 2 decades old. And so the new films do a much better job of placing Rushmore in the larger history of the Black Hills, but they still omit the fact that Borglum was affiliated with the Klan. They still omit the fact that he worked on Stone Mountain. And to me, there is no Mount Rushmore without Stone Mountain. Borglum learned so much practically on his work at Stone Mountain, and he brought so much politically with him from his time in Atlanta as well.
Today, just as when the memorial was first conceived, the Black Hills remain sacred to the Lakota people. They're the original inhabitants of this land, and the Black Hills sit at the center of their cosmological beliefs. Yet until 2004, Native American history and culture were barely acknowledged at Mount Rushmore.
The United States took the Black Hills of South Dakota in a very traumatic event for Lakota many generations on. And that moment also sort of led to other very traumatic points of history, whether it's the massacre of Wounded Knee in 1890, the boarding schools that you referred to, having kids taken from families and put in residential boarding schools, having more land taken from Lakota families. All of that is reflected in how many Lakota, not all, how many Lakota see Mount Rushmore standing today in the Black Hills.
Davis says that for many Native Americans, the faces of 4 white men carved into their sacred mountain feels like sacrilege.
It's hard to come up with an analogy. I've tried before, and it's hard because it's not something that's easily relatable. Take one of our, most sacred sites in the United States. I mean, let's just say theoretically that, the White House is one of our sacred sites because of who we are as a people. And let's say there was another people that came into the United States and killed off 95% of Americans, as Americans killed off 95% of Native Americans, and then, built a memorial in the White House to 4 of their leaders. I mean, that would be about the equivalent of what we'd be feeling. And I think, there's a great deal of trauma that's associated with Mount Rushmore because of that.
This perspective shows how unresolved the monument's legacy remains and why proposals to alter or expand Rushmore still strike a nerve today. Earlier this year, Republican House Representative Anna Paulina Luna introduced a bill to add President Donald Trump's face to the memorial. Most geologists say that isn't physically possible and would risk the structural integrity of the entire mountain. The addition would also likely face a lot of political resistance. Meanwhile, 15 miles away, work on the Crazy Horse Memorial, a tribute to the great Lakota leader, continues more than 50 years after it started. Many see it as a direct rebuttal to Rushmore, but Davis has a different view.
I came to have almost more problems with Crazy Horse than I did with Mount Rushmore. And that's because, for a lot of reasons, but one of them is, Crazy Horse was a great Lakota leader who refused to have his photo taken. He didn't want his image captured. And so, extend that hundreds of years down the line, how do you think he would feel about having his face carved into the Black Hills? My guess is that he would abhor it. And I think there's also a lot of, Native peoples around the Black Hills who don't want the hills to be desecrated in any way, whether they're carving 4 white presidents or a Lakota leader.
As for Mount Rushmore, the site draws in 2.5 million visitors each year, making it one of the most popular landmarks in the country and a major driver of South Dakota's tourism economy. On its 100th anniversary, the memorial offers a clear look at the priorities of the period in which it was carved, highlighting both the stories the nation wanted to tell and the ones it overlooked. Davis adds that the portrait also holds different meanings to different people.
Memorials like Mount Rushmore, like any historical memorials that we have across the country, they're not static. Just because they're carved into granite, just because they're made of marble or concrete, doesn't mean their meanings are set in stone. They evolve as we evolve, as our understanding of history evolves. And I think that's a great thing. And so I think as we commemorate the 100th anniversary of the dedication of Mount Rushmore, I think it's important to sort of understand that, how Mount Rushmore was designed in 1925 is different than how it looks to us in 2025. And that's great. I think we should be able to move with meanings of memorials as our understanding of histories evolve, as our understanding of ourselves as a country evolve.
Matthew Davis's book, A Biography of a Mountain, The Making and Meaning of Mount Rushmore, is available now online and can be requested through your local bookstore. To find out more about our guest this week, visit viewpointsradio.org. The story was written and produced by Polly Hansen and Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Gary Price.
Coming up, we speak with one Michigan mom who's at her breaking point with the cost of living when Viewpoints returns. For Michigan resident Christina Kuhn, a typical morning starts at 6 a.m. Her family only owns one working car, so she drops her 3 young kids off at school early and then drives her partner to work before starting her own job at a nonprofit at 8:30. Once she finishes her work for the day, she circles back to pick her 3 kids up from school while her partner heads over to his second job that stretches until 10:30 or 11 p.m. This leaves Kuhn to single parent every night, preparing dinner, overseeing homework, and tidying up the house. By the time she's done with that, it's bedtime, and the entire cycle resets. But no matter how hard or how long they work, it still feels like they're always playing catch-up. Kuhn and her partner live a modest life. The couple live in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, and rent a 3-bedroom apartment for their family of 5. Together, they earn about $70,000 a year. We first spoke to Kuhn back in October of 2023 when she was paying for daycare for her youngest. Back then, she shared with us how she juggled this extra bill while living paycheck to paycheck.
When I get paid, the first thing I do is pay her tuition so that I can make sure that I can have my grocery money, my bill money. I have to make sure that that gets paid first before I do anything else. And that stresses me out a little bit because it's like, what would I do if I okay, I pay that and then it's like, now my grocery money is subtracted or this money, or I can't put her in things outside of the home because I have to make sure her tuition pays.
In our first interview, we talked extensively about the hefty cost of childcare and how being tight on money had limited options for her family. Kuhn voiced her frustration about not feeling supported as a parent.
I work 2 jobs to afford everything, and I still feel like I'm failing. I cannot provide her things in life if I don't go to work. And if she doesn't have somewhere to go, then I can't provide her things in life because I can't go to work because she'll be home with me. You have to work because you can't afford to stay home. You have to have a good education for your child, but you have to afford it, but you can't afford it because your salary doesn't allow you to afford it. And it's just like, you feel like all these orange cones are in your way that you have to navigate around. And it's like, I have to do all this to make sure that my child is getting a quality education, but you guys are saying, we're not going to help you provide a good education. We're just going to hope you find it.
Fast forward 2 years to today, and she's no longer paying the added cost of early childcare. With this change, you might assume that she's in a better financial place. However, the cost of everything, from food to rent to basic utilities, has gone up. Meanwhile, her household income has stayed pretty much the same.
Not to cry on the radio in the interview, but it is probably the most, you feel like a failure as a parent, and to look at your kids in the face to say, we can't do A, B, C, A through Z, really. We don't do anything because the cost of everything is so high. And we have 3 kids, and you're like, okay, who stays home?
And with the holidays around the corner, it's just another financial reminder that the family can't keep up with expenses.
If it wasn't for my parents, we wouldn't have a Christmas either. I can't afford Christmas presents for my kids. And that is like the worst. That is the worst feeling in the world, to think of Christmas morning and your kids are just going to look at you like, how come Santa didn't see us? And you don't even know what to say to them because you're the one that's supposed to provide everything for them.
And she isn't alone in feeling this way. Tens of millions of Americans are struggling with higher prices and stagnating paychecks. Groceries for the week that once cost $150 now run closer to $190. Since 2019, food prices have jumped 25% nationwide, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And rent isn't any better. The real estate platform Zillow shows that the typical U.S. rental is 30% more expensive than 5 years ago. For Kuhn, her rent in Michigan has increased year over year and was recently raised by $120 per month. For some, this may not seem like a sizable jump, but when you're on a tight budget, every dollar adds up.
$120 may not sound like a lot to some people, but it could be groceries for 2 weeks for us. We haven't even really been able to grocery shop like that. We've just been trying to go here and there and maybe grocery shop when we need it, and just like make as much as we can out of what we have. That's been really stressful.
On top of this, Kuhn's partner is currently sick and hospitalized, leaving him unable to work. Because he's not salaried and is considered an hourly wage worker, this means lost income for the last 2 weeks.
Going to work, trying to maintain composure because I don't know what his health is going to be like. I don't know what the next couple months are going to look like for him either. So, it's just a lot on your plate and you feel like I don't want to go to work. I want to stay home and take care of my family. But if I don't work, we don't survive.
And this is what it means to live without a safety net. There's no emergency fund to fall back on, no cushion if a paycheck disappears or a bill comes in higher than expected. Nationally, only about half of Americans have even a 3-month emergency savings fund, according to 2025 data from the Federal Reserve. Like so many without that buffer, Kuhn is balancing on a razor-thin margin, earning just enough to stay afloat, but never enough to get ahead or create any real breathing room. She's frustrated with policy decisions that seem to overlook families in situations like hers.
I've never had a shut-off notice in my life. And now I feel like every time I turn around, it's like somebody's calling to figure out, when are you going to pay this? When are you going to pay that? And I'm like, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked it because I don't have the answer. It feels like the world imploded and now we have to pay for it by not being able to afford anything. And it's like, people sit up there with so much money they don't even know what to do with it and make these decisions for people who have nothing and take more. It's like, I have nothing left to give and you want to take more from me. And it's just like, you're taking from my kids. I can wear the same holy clothes and, the look a mess because I haven't had my hair cut and I don't know how long. I don't care. But my kids need haircuts. My kids need uniforms. My kids need boots.
Despite all of the stressors, the one constant she leans on is the support she finds at home.
These 3 kids that I am with day in and day out, they keep me on my toes. They make me laugh. They make me cry. They frustrate me to no end. But the love that they give me is unmatched to any Christmas bonus or any present I could get. But I want to do it for them. And if anybody is shaming you or making you feel bad, just remember that they're not in your shoes and they couldn't probably walk a mile in them.
It's a perspective shaped by both hardship and resilience, and it reflects the position so many Americans are in. Federal data shows that even as overall inflation cools, core expenses like food, housing, and utilities still remain high, leaving families bracing for a level of strain that may not lift anytime soon. To learn more about this topic and our guest, Christina Kuhn, head to viewpointsradio.org. This story was written by our executive producer, Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
At Progressive, we're making things even easier. We'll help you bundle your home and car insurance together so you can save on both. Learn more at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
This is Viewpoints Explained. I'm Ebony McMorris. For many, the holidays are when our fridges hit maximum capacity. Leftovers pile up left and right, pies rotate in and out. And meanwhile, everyone's quietly debating what really needs to go back in the fridge. But here's the twist. Some of the dishes we often treat as safe this time of year really aren't. Take pumpkin pie. Many of us assume you can leave it out, but food experts say it really needs to be refrigerated within 2 hours because it's made with eggs and dairy. Same goes for custard, pecan, or any pie that isn't fully fruit-based. Another holiday mistake that could lead to food poisoning: the slow, all-day grazing platter of meats, cheeses, and dishes and sides happening on the kitchen counter. Once food dips below 140 degrees, bacteria starts multiplying fast. The U.S. Department of Agriculture recommends putting away any perishable dishes after 2 hours, or 1 hour if the house is especially warm from ovens, radiators, and a lot of guests. If you're serving any cold items like deviled eggs or a shrimp cocktail, keep them at 40 degrees or below by placing the dishes in a bowl of ice. Even after a successful meal, it's normal to feel overwhelmed by the cleanup. The USDA recommends using or freezing cooked meat, sides, and desserts within 3 or 4 days. One trick to buy more time is to quickly get food in the fridge or freezer post-meal. Divide big portions into shallow containers so they cool faster and stay fresher. Also, label each container with the food name and use by date to help keep things organized and reduce food waste. When reheating any leftovers, use a food thermometer to make sure all food has reached at least 165 degrees. That's the zone where bacteria are killed off. If you're using a microwave, make sure to cover and rotate the dish so it heats evenly. Hope everyone listening has a happy and healthy holiday season this year. That's Viewpoints Explained for this week. More in a moment.
Welcome to Culture Crash, where we examine what's new and old in entertainment. Author Joe Hill is known for his creepy tales of horror and discontent. He wrote the source material for the Netflix show Lock and Key, the 2013 movie Horns, and the Black Phone movies starring Ethan Hawke. He's been publishing his work for decades now, but Joe Hill's latest novel, called King Sorrow, might just be his best work yet. King Sorrow is an 896-page behemoth of a book that tells the fantastical and unfortunate story of a group of college students who mess with a divine power they don't fully understand, unleashing a mystical and evil dragon upon the world. Hill is able to seamlessly guide audiences through decades of story, changing perspective from one fully realized character to another, keeping things fresh but always returning to his central themes of sacrifice and friendship. King Sorrow is a horror novel full of dark humor, mythical fantasy, thrilling sequences, and a true reckoning with how our society has changed in the past 40 or so years. Hill weaves a number of news headlines, social evolutions, and technological breakthroughs into his narrative, emphasizing just how fast everything seems to be evolving. In a digital era full of AI tools and efficiency markers, of what use are Faustian bargains and fairy tales? Brimming with memorable characters, clever writing, and a number of situations beyond my most nightmarish imagination, King Sorrow is an immersive roller coaster of a story, and a journey I'm sure I'll go on again. I'm Evan Rook.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.